What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. Gonna veer a little bit today. I have Mike Sando from The Athletic, one of the best writers in the country. He will join us because he did a story on Robert Kraft, first on his Hall of Fame candidacy, and Mike's one of the foremost guys when it comes to the Hall of Fame, but also on how the 81-year-old owner of the Patriots will proceed when the season ends. He called around the NFL, talked to a lot of people, including, well, we'll let Mike tell you. Here it is. Did Kraft's candidacy for the Hall of Fame prompt you to do this story initially, or was it all multi-tiered? Because I get a feeling you said, I'm going to do this, and then you started going in different directions, too.
So it's a little bit of an excuse for me to write about Hall of Fame credentials because I'm really interested in that. And then just tying it in, I feel like a lot of people have been writing about what's Kraft going to do, this or that. And so I thought I would tie that all together. I'll go back, though, to the summer when I'm on the Hall of Fame committee and I'm on the subcommittee that does contributors. And so is Bill Belichick. And so my job over the summer as the representative from the Seattle market was to do the presentation on Mike Holmgren as a coach. So I think Mike's a great coach. I, though, am big into criteria. And I came up with a criteria for head coaches that I thought was really good. And I presented it in the meeting. And I think, while it helped Mike Holmgren, I think it actually helped put Don Coryell over the top in an unintentional way, but I don't care. I mean, I really only care about the process. I'm not in it for one guy. But
why is criteria important before you jump to that other aspect?
Because I
loved your explanation.
Because otherwise we devolve into who can get the most convincing narrative, right? Like if my role was to only find a way to get Mike Holmgren in, right? I could come up with some way where I would almost look at his career and tailor my criteria for him at the expense of others. Or that to me, that's the Hall of Fame process. I don't want to say at its worst, but that's what it can devolve into because you have a market that you represent. Your job is to put the best foot forward with an individual. But I'm like, look, if we just come up with the right criteria, the right people will get in, whether it's this year or next year. And that's what I want. So this last offseason, I came up with some ways to evaluate elite production for receivers or running backs era adjusted within their eras. And I loved it. And so I came up with this one on coaches and the coaching criteria was going to get to Kraft, but the coaching criteria was more like, hey, did you do it with more than one quarterback? Sort of the Gibbs test. Now, put aside the Shulas and Belichicks. If you are somewhere for 20 years and have the most wins, we don't even have to discuss your candidacy, right? But for everybody else, I'm talking about, hey, did you turn around more than one place? We're trying to find ways that it was the coach, right? So when I did Mike Holmgren, I'm like, he went to Green Bay. They haven't been in the playoffs for 15, 20 years. They immediately become a contender. They're one of the great teams of the 90s. They win a Super Bowl. He goes to Seattle. They haven't done crap for 10 years. They immediately go to the playoffs with John Kitna. So I'm explaining this. I did the same thing with Coryell. Well, for owners, I was thinking, look, did you come in and sort of take over this depressed asset? Did you pump it up? Did you do it with more than one coach, right? Did you win or at least have success? It wasn't about that guy. So I had this thing presented, and then Polian, of all people, who you'd think would be, Patriot fans would think would be a Patriot hater, the tension over the years. He had this incredibly detailed, really put his thought in on Kraft during the meeting. Now, in the meeting, we're not really allowed to say what happens in the meeting, right? I didn't do anything on it, but I was so interested in it that Bill and I had multiple follow-up conversations. And then I decided when this stuff was going down, the Patriots sort of losing their way a little bit here, what's Kraft going to do? I thought I'm going to call Bill and we'll just go on the record, right?
Let me just go through that 4-point, since I have it right in front of me, the 4-point checklist for Bill Polian for an owner. 1, lead a franchise successful on the field and at the gate. Certainly done that. 2, put the franchise in a positive position as a corporate citizen of its market. Patriots are leaders in that. Serve for a reasonably long period on one of the 3 major NFL competition committees or communications, whatever. I only get
labor, television, and competition. One of the 3 main.
Be a leader among owners and in the industry as a major policy maker. Easily checks all those boxes. I think he's obviously, you and I have probably been covering the league virtually the identical window. It's almost, I hate to say it because it's a little parochial. It's almost a disservice to have this guy at 81 still not in the Hall of Fame when the end is closer than the beginning.
Absolutely, yeah. I think some of the Hall of Fame is a hard thing to predict the exact timing of when things happen. Like when we do the modern era ones, right? We have to pick 5 people from a list of 15. Just mathematically, there's 3,000 unique combinations of 5 that could happen. The 5 that make it might not have been the 5 on any one voter's ballot. Understand just the math of all of this. So that's kind of what happens when you have even on a subcommittee getting together. Can go and veer in a couple of different directions at the end, and then the support for one candidate can come at the expense of another. Kraft has huge support. I was a little surprised he didn't make it. I was a little surprised that Coryell did over him. Maybe he'd just been in the hopper a little bit longer, and Don Coryell never got to see his day. He passed away. So I'm hopeful for Kraft. I think he's a great owner. I really do. I think transcending your team is a big part of this, and his role in labor and TV, to me, puts it over the top with, of course, the franchise success. And I give him credit for managing the Brady-Belichick relationship, for hiring Pete Carroll, even though Robert Kraft would admit that he could have handled Carroll's tenure better in terms of how he was kind of coming off of Bill Parcells, and so he didn't give the coach as much probably power over personnel, and it probably hurt Pete. But Pete Carroll's a great hire. He's a great coach. He hired Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's probably going to go to the Hall of Fame, probably on his own. If he can have another life here after Russell Wilson, he may go to the Hall of Fame himself. So you would have hired 2 Hall of Fame coaches. And oh, by the way, you went to the Super Bowl with Bill Parcells too, which you could say that's Bill Parcells, but we can name a lot of places Bill Parcells was where he didn't go to the Super Bowl, right?
Right. And you also had the balls to piss off Bill Parcells.
Absolutely.
To say, Bill Parcells, look, we don't like the way you're doing this, where it's,
So he's a great owner. I think that part's established. That's me indulging the fact that I like to have Hall of Fame processes, so I wanted to do that.
Mike, how frequently are debated those ancillary issues that surround the Patriots because they've been good for so long? Spygate, Deflategate. We look at those, and I characterize them as, if the Patriots weren't as good as they were, they never would have risen to levels of prominence. There was a reason that the league went bananas on them, and it was to try and either explain away how good the Patriots were or cut them down at their knees. They were vindictive. I don't think the way they played out had vindictiveness to them. But how does that enter into it, as well as, candidly, Robert Kraft's West Palm Beach imbroglio a couple years ago?
So I don't remember. I haven't heard anyone bring up all those other Deflategate things. I don't think that's part of the equation, as far as I know. I've never heard that be brought up. The timing of the West Palm Beach thing, I think, was a factor. I think at the time that, first of all, it's still fairly fresh. Number 2, there's a lot of stuff going on in the league with the Deshaun Watson situation, all of that. I think that was probably, I'm not a psychologist or a mind reader, but I think that probably was, from a timing standpoint, not helpful for him. So I don't know how much debate there is that would be a disqualifier, right? But I do think that the timing of it was not good for his candidacy, just my opinion.
Mike, when entering into this story on Kraft, he did the smart thing and also got intel from Bill Polian on how he ought to approach Bill Belichick at the end of the season. And it's not going in there slamming through the saloon doors, is it?
No, and you wouldn't necessarily expect that to happen, even though I'm sure Robert Kraft is extremely frustrated. Maybe in his private moments, he's putting his fist through a mirror or something. But, I think Bill's approach is a little bit more like, hey, look, we both know this is not what we want. What's your plan, though? Bill thought you deferred to the coach. Hey, you're the man. What's the plan? And then hear what he has to say. And who knows, maybe they've had these conversations already. I doubt it. In season would be surprising, but then see what he says. And if his diagnosis is similar to yours, then there's not a lot to talk about. But I think the interesting thing would be, of course, if he didn't really think there was anything broken, and then then you're in a situation where, well, wait a minute, let's then, as an owner, I think you have to press a little bit and say, and maybe try to get a little bit more detailed answers, because I think we can all see from the outside that the offense is broken, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing about, because Belichick has been allowed to and has earned the right to operate his galaxy the way he sees fit, the Krafts have given him the latitude to do that. And as a result, they don't want to be looking over his shoulder now that things are going sideways, even though they allowed him to make decisions that are certainly dubious in hindsight. But there's still we don't want to turn him into an armadillo if we go in there, but we need an explanation. Does he understand it to the same level? My understanding is from conversations that I've had is that's exactly what they plan to do. He doesn't seek a lot of outside counsel, Bill Belichick. And the Krafts have made it pretty obvious over the course of time, too, that Bill has earned that, and they allow him that. But at this point, it's exactly what Bill Polian said is my understanding of how it will unfold. And this is what Polian said to our guy, Mike Sando. This is brought to you by Shaw's, perfecting the art of fresh. You don't need to make it worse, and he won't. The Steelers, for example, have never had a losing season with Tomlin, but they have been out of the playoffs a few times. That's why I place value on long-term excellence by the franchise. It's a long-term success stability blocks as opposed to, this is funny, the Red Sox, for example, where they are up one year and down the next, which wasn't the case when the Larry Lucchino group was in ownership. That speaks to whoever's calling the shots. ... Continuing, you just sit down and say, okay, this has been an unsatisfactory year, and I don't need to pound the desk and talk about that. You know that, I know that. Then you say, you're the man, what's the plan going forward? And then you hold them to that plan going forward. And if you disagree as an owner, you say, okay, I'm not sure I agree with this. Why do you think that we should do this or do that? And that's what he can do. Put his faith in Bill. Bill hasn't forgotten how to coach. What Bill has done, though, Mike, and I think that this is the biggest concern, is the management. Coaching he gets. He understands what to do on 3rd and 8 in the third quarter when the game is going this way and he's got an injured middle linebacker, whatever. What I think he has struggled with, because he's been cloistered, because he's had such an outflow of coaches and advisors, he wants to pull the comforter of security around himself and say, I feel comfortable with these guys, and I'm going to go ahead with these guys, even though I know it might be dicey. Is that what you kind of gathered from conversations that you had with executives?
I thought the most interesting part of the piece for me, the new learning for me, or just a great reminder, was that for these older coaches, one of the hardest things is coaching your coaches and having everyone. So there is a comfort blanket. That's why you have Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, because you'd rather do that than train some new guy, right? In all of the ways of how we do it. And the problem is at this point, you're out of those guys. And, I mentioned earlier that, I had covered Mike Holmgren when he came to Seattle. Well, look at Mike Holmgren's Green Bay staff. It's Andy Reid, it's Steve Mariucci, it's John Gruden, it's Dick Duran. I mean, I could probably name 5 other guys that you've all heard of. When by the time he got to Seattle, those guys weren't there. Fritz Shermer was his great D coordinator. He died. And it was like Mike couldn't find a defensive coordinator for like the rest of his tenure. He never got it fixed. And then by the end of his tenure, he had guys on his staff that he knew from the San Francisco high school scene, right? That when he played ball and coached there, one of his best friends was on the staff. And there were some good coaches too, but it wasn't the all-star cast. I always believe that, coaching staff atrophy is a real thing. The longer you are in a place, it's just hard to do. And that table that I ran, I mean, I know people that follow the Patriots that are in the league who it had just gone by the boards to them that Ivan Fears had left. You don't even think about Ivan Fears.
Right.
You don't even think about it. But it's the running back who's flipping the ball back.
I mean, Ernie Adams, and that's the thing too, Michael, is Ernie Adams isn't on there necessarily, or maybe he is, but we don't have the players
I
on
left
there.
freaking Ernie Adams off of this list. Unbelievable. He's supposed to be on there. Yeah, Ernie's supposed to be on there. God, that's
but look at Hightower, Chung, Gronkowski, Edelman. Those are pseudo coaches who also instill a culture as well and hold players accountable, because you need those lieutenants, as you saw.
And I think now I will say this: they are highly ranked on defense, and that you got to give them a lot of credit for that. But situational football, they are not good, and they used to be great at it. I remember, like I said, I was covering Seattle when Deion Branch came to Seattle. I was amazed. His knowledge of the game, the heads-up plays he made, were different from what the Seattle guys did. I can remember heads-up things. We wrote about it. Now go to the Cincinnati game. It's first down. This is when they're going to fumble the ball. They're going to try to run a play without scoring, but Cincinnati knows it. Cincinnati plays for the dive and strips it. They're ahead of them. Then you get a 15-yard penalty out of frustration on the change of possession. Then the punt returner muffs the ball, loses out of bounds, you lose the return. Then you get 2 penalties on offense. Well, Who does that? That would never happen. I mean, shoot, the whole thing, everyone focused on the Vegas game, the last play, but their blocked punt is totally unpatriot-like, where they're pushing the referee to get more time on the clock, then the wing isn't ready, then the block is so complete that the guy absorbs the punt in the belly. How many times does that happen? That happens like on the playground. When you block a punt and get kicked in the stomach, that happens in high school. When's the last time you block a punt in the stomach? I mean, that's just a complete failure of operation. So, they had another one in the second quarter when they're trying to the timeouts, and they try to do the quick count and jump over the pile, and there's an illegal shift. Those are the things that we're starting to see bleed into the football operation. Now, maybe some of this is young team and all of that, but I don't know. I don't remember those things happening like that. And so, that's the thing that concerns me about whether you can get it back, is that all that institutional knowledge. And thank you for pointing out that Ernie Adams isn't on there.
Oh, I
didn't add him back on. No, he should be on there. But we got Ivan Fears, we got Casario, we got Scarnecchia, we got Josh, we got Boyer, we got Flores, Chad O'Shea, Ziegler. We don't even talk about him. There's a million guys that have walked out that door that could handle a lot of this stuff and keep them a little bit more on autopilot. They're probably more than ever on Bill Belichick's plate at a time when it's harder to do that. I don't care what you say. As you get older, it is harder to do more things.
And here's the quote Mike called around the NFL. He spoke to an exec from a team outside the AFC East. And this exec said to him, the hardest thing for older coaches isn't innovation or work ethic or want to. We see that here. None of that is lacking with Bill Belichick. I'm saying that. Yeah. Back to the quote. None of that has changed. What changes is coaching up the young coaches. It's a pain in the ass to go back and teach somebody the way to do everything. And so you carry coaches on your staff sometimes because they mimic that message he wants about culture or whatever, not necessarily because they are the best coaches or the best fits. And that to me is writ large what the Patriots are. Look, Matt has a bad run in Detroit. Bring him back to be a Swiss Army knife in contracts, in free agency, in draft. And that's what he did. And then when you needed to plug a hole on the offensive side of the ball, I can trust Matt. At least he knows what I want. Joe Judge gets fired after a horrific run with the New York Giants in which the quarterback descended. Well, I mean, if I bring him in here, he'll at least get it. I mean, we can have Matt oversee what he's doing. And then we got Troy, and I know what I'm doing here too. And Mac's a smart kid. And then it doesn't work. And you brought them back and put them in those positions of influence because of that. Meanwhile, it's a hard place to work. The pay ain't great. Sometimes the guys don't get titles. It's very cloistered. Two of Bill's sons are on the staff. Not to say they're not good coaches, but it's indicative of how far he casts his net. Gerard Mayo reeled back from my show to come back and coach. Troy Brown didn't look too far for him. Billy Yates, former player. There are multiple lacrosse guys who entered Bill's world through lacrosse. Mike Pellegrino, Vinny Sinceri. These are Sinceri might not be lacrosse, but I could be wrong. He could be. But that's not casting a wide net for fresh and ideals, fresh and shiny ideas.
No, he's not going to call in somebody who's going to run a totally different offensive scheme and just turn it over to him, right?
Can you believe, though, Mike, that he decided to run a totally new scheme, too, this year? Yeah. In addition to having a guy who is an HVAC repairman do your roof and your windows? Sorry.
It is hard. It is hard. That was one of the quotes in there too. It was like, can you imagine being the owner and this is what's proposed? So that's why I think, when Bill Polian says, hey, this is how it's going to go. Is it really that simple that Bill's going to have a solution or proposal that makes sense?
Yeah, that's the thing is, what is it? And it simply boils down to, and as I reported earlier this week and multiple people have talked about, just to move the Bill O'Brien ball down the field further, Mike speaks to an AFC coaching veteran who said, I think all signs point to Bill O'Brien. We've heard earlier in the season that O'Brien, from reporters like Albert Breer, is anxious to come back to the NFL. He was described as a, quote, strong option over the weekend by Ian Rappaport. And beyond that being a strong option, we all knew that he would be a strong option, but reached out to
Yeah.
a person who'd know, and their indication was, because I asked this, I mean, does Bill want Bill O'Brien back? And I was told that absolutely he'd be amenable to bringing Bill O'Brien back. And the individual said they would be surprised if it's not already a done deal, which was eye-opening to me.
Yeah.
But that's the domino that had to fall. If O'Brien wants
Yeah.
to come back to the NFL, and it's clear to somebody who would know that Bill would be fine with O'Brien coming back, then that's all you got to do is just walk down the aisle.
And to me, that's just an easy fix. Like, I would feel good about that, wouldn't you?
Yes,
I mean,
I
somebody
would,
who's been a
because you
head
could
coach
just
of
say
an
to O'Brien
operation.
what you did to McDaniels.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, can you just take care of that? Because the
Yeah.
three of us together couldn't, and Josh used to just take care of it. Can you do that for me? That's it.
Yes, absolutely. And Bill O'Brien, even though it ended terribly in Houston, has been a successful head coach, so he can certainly handle an offense. And I think it would be. I think to me, that would just put a lot of things at ease a little bit here.
Fantastic intel. While I have you, I might as well do this. I think it'll
Yeah.
be fun just to add it on in the pod. Nobody spends more time. There are others who spend as much time, but nobody spends more time than Mike observing the league. So give me a few favorites for you. You don't have to tell me who you're voting for, but MVP.
Oh, I would do Mahomes every day of the week. I think there's more on his plate. They're a bottom 5 defense, special teams component, and they win all the time. And they did it in a different way without Tyreek Hill.
Coach of the year, lay up for Sirianni, or do we have Doug Peterson closing on the outside?
For me, head coach. So here's how I do. Actually, how I look at it is I pull up the preseason Vegas win totals and I compare it to now, and I see who's just overperformed what they were expected to do. And Nick Sirianni is at the top of that list, even though they had an easy schedule. It was probably not as easy. My second guy though, might be Kyle Shanahan. I think to be 11-4 and fairly dominant. And
Yes.
to do it with 3 different quarterbacks, even though I think that Trey Lance getting hurt actually probably helped them on the field with Jimmy Garoppolo coming back, because he's just a seasoned veteran and easy to get back on the bicycle. But they're 3-0 with and have beaten teams that are in the playoff fringe at least with Brock Purdy in the lineup, and no one's really talking about. No one's like,
No, you're right.
My gosh, it's just like taken for granted. They're 11-4.
East Coast bias. Brian Daboll had a shot for a little while. He's out.
Pete Carroll did too. I like, if Pete Carroll had a winning record moving on from Russell Wilson, I'd be on that. But they've lost a bunch of games lately.
Can Geno win comeback player of the year? Who's your other candidate? McCaffrey, perhaps?
So I always feel like to be comeback player of the year, I guess it's not defined. I always think of somebody who had an injury, but
Yeah,
and
you always
Geno
want an
didn't.
injury.
But I could still go with Geno. I think he's, because what's fallen apart is more around him. Their run game and defense have been all over the place. I think he's pretty good. So I give him a lot of credit. He actually made the Pro Bowl, and it was deserved. Now, the NFC is a very depressed situation. It's not like Brady and Rodgers were going to get it this year. But I still think what he's done is pretty amazing. And I love the comeback this way. Like, you just stick with it and work. This guy's been a backup. I mean, he got punched.
That's what I love about it. That's why
He
I
got
think
punched in the jaw at his locker. I mean, and it wasn't his fault. I mean, the other guy's wrong. It wasn't like Geno Smith was a hated jerk or anything. I mean, this to do what he's done and wait your turn, to be patient. That's not any of us anymore. When you go get to buy something and you find out that you have to wait 2 weeks for shipping, you're like, no, I'll go to another store. I'll get it today. I'll just go on Amazon. We can't even wait. Remember when shipping used to be 4 to 6 weeks, and
4 to 6, right? Yeah,
4 to 6 weeks. That doesn't fly anymore. And so for him to be a backup for all those years and then be ready when you get your turn, that's the type of corny stuff I like to tell my sons when they roll their eyes. I'm like, look at this. This is how you do it. This is a guy. This is how you do it.
It's like Nick Foles in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah,
he's not comeback player of the year.
Yeah, but Geno's done this for the whole year, been pretty good. So I give him
defensive player of the year, Bosa.
He
has now. The reason I mentioned Bosa so easily is I was looking at some odds last night. It's just him and Parsons are listed on the place that I was looking at.
I would lean towards Bosa probably at this point. He is amazing. I would have thought it would be Parsons coming into the year, but I'll go with that.
All right. Okay, I think I've extracted everything I wanted to you. I told it was going to be 10 to 15 minutes. We're at 28, 27 right now. I'm going to cut you free.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Mike Sando, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us. Always appreciate your time, really, because I think that you bring a lot of acumen.
Oh, I sure appreciate it. Thanks, Tom. Enjoy your work. Keep up the great podcast and show, and we'll check in again down the road.
Thank you, buddy.